Are live. Welcome everyone to who's joining us for our second edition of Astro-BS. I am at my home office. The rest of the stargazing leaders, Matt, Ryan, and Dave, are at the Wyoming Stargazing office. And we're gonna chat about some current astronomy events. If you missed us last time, we talked about the recent discovery of potential life on Venus, some phosphine gas that was discovered in the upper atmosphere, which may or may not be the chemical signatures of biological life. We made some predictions about whether that was going to turn out to be life or not. And we talked a little bit about potential life on Mars. And what do you know, just a couple days after that discovery of potential life on Venus, there was a new discovery published in Nature about 2 additional underground lakes on Mars. So now we know of 3 underground lakes on Mars. They are heavily salty, probably much saltier than oceans on Earth. Because for them to be liquid water, which we know that they are, they'd have to have a really, really high salt content. So it may or may not be too salty for life to exist. But based on our conversation last week, I would love to hear what the Wyoming stargazing leaders have to say about this new water, abundant water discovered on Mars, and what that means for life there.
Probably already water skiing under there. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's cool if they found more lakes. Are they generally in the same area, or are they in different areas? Do you know?
They're in different areas. Yeah, I'm looking at that study right now.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, it was just 2 days ago was, or 3 days ago was the 28th.
Yeah, I don't know if it changes my thoughts from last week much, other than I think it's cool we found more possibilities to explore, I guess.
And
Yeah.
I think also water may be more abundant than we think. I mean, think about how hard it is to bond hydrogen and oxygen together. Pretty common elements in the universe.
Right on. Yeah, I just thought that was interesting that came up just a couple days after we were talking about that.
Yeah.
What technology do we have now to find those that we couldn't have figured that out like a while ago?
Yeah, so it's all done with radar, and it's using the Mars orbiters that are orbiting Mars. But there were, I think, a couple, let's see here. Yeah, so it was the European Space Agency's Mars orbiting spacecraft called Mars Express. And I think this is just based on more observations. So I guess the original observations back in 2012, 2015 were based on just 29 observations. That's what that first study was based on, where the initial lake was announced. So 28 observations. The latest study was a broader set comprising 134 observations from 2012 to 2019. So 4 times the number of observations as before. And they feel a lot more confident with that additional data, that these lakes are real and not something else.
Cool. I think it's pretty awesome progress. I mean, to know that there's even more of an abundance of liquid water in some form on the planet. I think that's good. That's good news regardless, isn't it? Wouldn't you say?
Good news for what?
I mean, it could be good news for potential life. That could be good news for humans if we start settling there. And say the more water that's there on the planet already is good for us.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think the question is just how salty this water is. if it turns out to be as salty as these scientists are saying, let's see what it says here. I know they said it could be potentially as 20 times as salty as seawater.
Jeez.
If that were the case, there would be no life living there.
Yeah.
So it looks like, so lakes that have about 5 times the content of seawater can support life. And so we're talking about stuff like the Great Salt Lake, the Dead Sea, I think about like Mammoth Lakes. And we were talking about like simple brine shrimp and bacteria, nothing big in any of those places. But this might be 20 times as much salt content, which unfortunately would probably prevent life from being there. So if we were to use it for humans, once we colonize Mars, then we would have to figure out a way to desalinize it.
Well, yeah.
Which is,
And we have some kind of processes for that sort of thing here with our oceans already. I mean,
we do. Yeah, it's just wicked expensive and pretty inefficient.
Yeah.
But it could be done. It would be a whole lot easier than bringing water from Earth to Mars.
Totally.
Yeah. So I was looking through all of the discoveries in the last week on phys.org, and it was interesting to me that they didn't have this discovery of the Martian lakes. Apparently because it's just like, it's not really new. There's just 2 more from the last one. But there were several other really, really exciting discoveries announced. The one that really caught my attention was the latest report just from 2 days ago about the best measurement ever taken of the abundance of matter in the universe. And so, as of about 20 years ago, we realized that probably the majority of the universe was made up of some mysterious type of energy that we don't totally understand, dubbed dark energy, also called potentially the cosmological constant or quintessence. We have no idea what it is, but it represents somewhere around 70% of what exists in the universe. And then another like 25% is dark matter, stuff that actually has mass. It's not energy, but probably not made up of the same type of atoms that baryonic matter is made up of, stuff like planets and us. And then, somewhere around 5% is actually the stuff that makes up us and all the planets, baryonic matter. So this recent discovery has honed in on that number a little bit. And so the new numbers are 68.5% dark energy and a total of 31.5% matter. And that includes both dark matter and the stuff that we're made up of. And I guess that the error value on that is just 1.3%, which is pretty good. So give or take 30% matter and 70% pure energy, which, it's a little disconcerting to think about that, right? Because when we think about the universe, we think about like the part of the universe that we actually see through electromagnetic radiation, planets, stars, and like to call that normal matter seems like a misnomer because all that is like 5% of what exists. And then the other like 26% of matter is dark matter that we can't see. And then the other 68.5% is dark energy. So like, why are we even calling it dark matter? Or why are we even calling it normal matter? Maybe we need to change the way we're talking about stuff like us. What do you guys think about that?
those calculations are pretty close to what I had come out with. So it's good to hear. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it just tells you like how much we don't know, because like when we talk about the normal matter, we're talking about the stuff that we feel like we have a good grasp on, and yet we would still admit that like most of that stuff, well, a lot of that stuff, we have plenty more for us to learn.
Mhm.
But then when it comes to all the other huge chunks, it's like, okay, like we made a name for it, but like we could kind of describe how it plays out a tad, but like realistically, we don't know much. So
Yeah,
and even if we were to like make like 100% understanding of what we consider normal matter, that's still such a small percentage of understanding of the universe. So.
Totally. Yeah, so I'm teaching this astronomy class right now to a local private high school in Jackson. And one of the homework questions that I gave them last week was, what do you think the most important lack of understanding is that we have of the universe? And some of them talked about this, the like what makes up the universe, right? We don't even know what close to 95% of what the universe is. That seems like a pretty big lack of understanding. But I'm curious about what you guys think about that. Is this it? Like, is it really important for us to understand like the big picture of what dark matter actually is and what dark energy actually is? Or are we better off like figuring out whether or not life exists on some like normal matter object that we might actually be able to visit with sometime? Like, what's most pressing? What should we be spending all of our hard-won research dollars on?
Well, I believe it's a fact that most of the universe is inaccessible. We'll never get there no matter how hard we try.
Not with that
attitude. Just physically. And I remember Josh, he's also one of the stargazing leaders. He sent me a video on YouTube, just like a timeline of the future of the universe. And, trillions of years from now is just the beginning of what could happen in, the long-term future. And if we do figure out what dark energy is, and we're like, okay, this is the reason space is blowing up, what can we do with that information? And I would think it's a little bit less than the information we could get from exploring, habitability on normal matter things.
Right on. That's an interesting perspective. Matt, Dave, what do you think?
Matt, what do you think?
I'm let's see. I mean, I'm a fan of things that are practical. And so sometimes when I'm talking about scientific discoveries out in the universe, I always wonder like what are we like, how does it help, I guess, in a way? And some things are just cool to know, honestly. But I don't know if my choices are between those two things. I'm not sure. I do know that
you can pick something else. You can definitely
I do know that in general, I get slightly amused by like this week I read that there are people living underground in tunnels in preparation of trying to see what the effects would be of people that are living on Mars, because they think that like too much radiation on the surface, you'd have to have something like that, which is cool. Their thoughts were for long-term development. My thoughts when it comes to like, trying to make Mars habitable for like a secondary option, if that's the goal, is like like what if we mess up the Earth? Which I know that's not every goal, but I feel like that's a common, like, whether it's a misconception or what, like that's what a lot of people think why we're trying to go to Mars. And when it comes to that, I just look around at the Earth and I'm like, we have a planet we can actually live on. and we see that we're destroying it. It seems easier to try to fix this thing that's already great. Like, and I always wondered, what if all the dollars we're trying to do to make Mars habitable was like directed into counteracting
Fighting climate change. Yeah.
exactly, counteracting a lot of the things that we're saying we're doing that's terrible, because we're gonna do the same thing to Mars even if we figure out how to make it good. It's just gonna go down faster. So I don't know, but I it's hard for me to say what would be better, because like, what if our understanding of dark matter, dark energy was like revolutionary, and how we could, I don't know, like discover other things, or like space travel or things like that. Like, I don't know what a better understanding would lead us towards. So it's hard for me to decide.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what makes answering that kind of question so hard, which is why I asked it to my high school students. I wanted them to squirm a little bit and like, just think about like the vastness that we don't know.
Yeah.
And the point that you bring up about devoting our resources to trying to fix problems here on Earth, I think is really interesting. One of my students actually just did a presentation on the connection between astronomy and climate change. And apparently there were a group of astronomers that actually calculated their impact on climate change through their profession as astronomers, right? So the energy and resources that went into building the telescopes that they use, their carbon footprint to travel to all the conferences that they go to. And their conclusion was like, well, we should start doing conferences via Zoom. Like, if we really care about this, like, clearly that is a reasonable solution to cut down the carbon footprint of our travel time. And as astronomers, they're not atmospheric scientists, but like the sky is their domain. Why are we not doing more to address these like very real problems that we have here on Earth right now?
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right that fixing those problems on Earth is going to be way easier than colonizing Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Matt pretty much said exactly what was coming to my head. Neil deGrasse Tyson has said the same thing.
Has he?
Yeah, if we had the technology to terraform an entire different planet, at that point we should have the technology to terraform our own planet, essentially. I also think that the potential of what we could discover by understanding at least a chunk of the remaining 95% of these. I mean, the things we could learn from that could be completely groundbreaking. I mean, the hypothetical list is pretty endless. So it's hard to decide where I think there'd be better potential, because I think both pathways can lead to a lot of positive things. I also think we should really figure out how to get more of the sun's energy.
More of the sun's energy.
Well, there was something I read today. There's like a compact fusion reactor that's supposed to be being created, I think in France or somewhere.
Isn't that what
Yeah.
they had in too?
And they think this one will be a lot faster than the other one. Apparently, there's been one being built in France that like estimated by 2035 or something that they'd figure it out. But this one was like supposed to be on a lot faster time scale than that. So there you go, the fusion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a game changer, right? If we're actually producing all of our energy through fusion, we could drastically cut our CO2 footprint. So why are we not investing every dollar that we're currently investing on building bigger telescopes to working on this fusion reactor? Why isn't that like the only thing that we put money towards?
Because you can come up with cool names for the telescopes. Like
Like the owl telescope,
the
the
owl telescope.
overwhelmingly large telescope.
Yeah.
You guys hadn't heard about that one?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I forgot about it.
Yeah. Or the, even there's like great acronyms like the VLA, right? Very large array.
SALT, South African Large Telescope.
Yeah. Some good ones. This fusion reactor looks really cool. I'm just looking at a picture of it right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. If there wasn't fusion in there, I thought I'd live in that.
Does it look like it did in Spider-Man 2, where they have to use the big mechanical arms to operate the tiny little sun in the laboratory?
Not yet. It doesn't.
Okay, well, just be careful if it looks like it. 'Cause we don't have a Spider-Man.
Sam, are you still there?
Oh no, he's
get
frozen.
this body real quick here. Oh, now you guys are back.
Cool.
I know they cut out the whole conversation.
I mean, I guess I have like one research dollars space exploration. I think it's because we can't help ourselves. I think we're just naturally curious. And there's no way that we're only going to invest our time and energy on, I think like the unfortunate like way we see things on Earth is like mundane, right? Like humans have been here throughout our whole existence. Like doing anything here is like boring. Like we want to explore new places. And so I think that's why there isn't a global consensus to address climate change. I think there's too much interest and curiosity to do other things. Even though it may turn out to be the biggest existential crisis that we're facing this century. I think just natural human curiosity points us in less practical, pragmatic directions. I mean, and so how do you redirect that, right? Like, is that something that like the field of astronomy needs to take a strong stand on and say like, okay, we are putting a full stop on scientific exploration of the universe until we figure out how to address climate change? Like, does that even make sense? I don't know.
Just get so many people to agree to that plan of action.
Yeah. I mean, trying to do something like that seems fairly problematic.
I think it'll probably just be a point where like, you can't ignore it because like just too massive of a scale. Like, well, people would argue that's already the case now, but I mean, clearly it can get worse. And I think at a certain point, you can't ignore it. And then I think I'm actually hopeful because I feel like if everybody does have a shift and if everybody directed their attention to it, like all the scientists, everybody, I think we could actually figure out some pretty dang good things. We have so many minds that are not trying that like, if our hand was forced, I think it would end up better for us than we would think if we all actually tried to think of some stuff.
We may have to hit, whatever our rock bottom
Yeah.
is. So a lot of people don't decide to lose the 400 pounds until they have the heart attack.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to the old saying of necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah.
Once we're all impacted to some like huge extent that we can no longer ignore, then we have to do something.
Yep.
Hopefully that isn't, the entire, globe close to the equator just becomes a scorching desert. Hopefully that's not rock bottom we need to get to.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, there are definitely some pretty scary predictions for how bad climate change could get in 10, 20, 30 years if we don't quickly reduce the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. And I mean, I guess I've been thinking a lot about that recently, like vis-a-vis COVID, right? So COVID was another very real existential crisis that really like every country in the world responded to immediately. And so what was it about this existential crisis that led to, immediate action that the existential crisis of climate change doesn't? Because like the majority of us alive today don't have a super high risk of dying of COVID. We don't have a super high risk of even, being badly sick because of COVID. Like the percentage of people who do is rather small, probably way smaller than the number of people who are going to be negatively impacted by climate change, potentially smaller than the number of people who are going to die because of climate change. So why did this like spur global action, whereas climate change remains something that like a lot of people deny even exists?
Yeah, climate change is slow. That's why.
You think it's just about the time frame?
Well, people were scared, and also at the beginning, like 4 or 5 months ago, people didn't know that like all of us were at a relatively low risk of dying from COVID. I think that was the scary thing, is no one actually knew at first. People were more afraid. I think now that we know, it makes it easier. The unknown is scary, and we've known about climate change for a long time, so it's not very scary anymore. COVID, we didn't know anything about, so we were pretty freaked out. If COVID continues I think the general fear of COVID has definitely like died off some, even though like United States, at least here, United States, it hasn't really actually gotten that great under control. But I would say the general fear is definitely like gone down.
The other thing I want to mention is that I believe that in the last decade or 2 decades, most people and nations have taken strides to minimize our impact on the planet. I would hate to think that ever since the Industrial Revolution, we've just been headlong dumping more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. I mean, we used to have leaded gasoline. And
I think that something that could really help shift the sense of urgency for climate change is, right now, the way that it is discussed regularly is from the point of view that it's future generations that have to deal with it. And the problem is like that's not really enough of a fire to light to push the current generation. It's just like when you decide you don't want to do the work this evening because you're just going to take care of it tomorrow and it'll be fine. And then tomorrow comes and you're just frantic and you don't have, and you hate yourself for not doing it earlier. But it's so easy to just put it off to tomorrow. I think that there may be quite a lot of that still going.
So I agree with you guys on all that. And I think you're right, Matt, that it was the impending doom of COVID that was fundamentally different than the impending doom of climate change. And like you just said, Dave, like it's way easier to push off impending doom that's 10 years away as opposed to potentially tomorrow. And so, I guess like when I think about that, then maybe we become just as complacent about COVID in, a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years as we are about climate change, when like the initial fear has worn off. I don't know though. I wonder about that. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not.
I mean, it's like Bacon's on the number 1 tier for cancer causing like connections.
Bacon?
But but like that's like within the next 50 years of your life. If they said I'm gonna get bacon if I eat bacon, I'm gonna get cancer within this year. Oh, I think my bacon consumption would go down a lot. But the possibility in the next 50 years, it's like, I mean, it's 50 years. It's just less scary.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to like bring this back to astronomy a little bit. And I'm thinking about like, I mean, like talking about bacon is great. Like, don't get me wrong. But I think there are some like really like some true existential connections here. And I'm thinking about the fact that regardless of climate change, our sun is going to run out of fuel beginning sometime in the next billion years or so. It's going to stop fusing hydrogen in its core, and it's going to start fusing helium. And when it does that, it's going to enter begin to enter its red giant phase. It's going to puff out and probably render life on Earth impossible. Just over a billion years, somewhere between a billion and 1.5 billion years from now. Regardless of what we do today, all life on Earth is going to be gone in 1.5 billion years. Well, that's a pretty long time frame. I don't lose sleep at night knowing that. I don't think many people do, but it is an existential crisis. Like, it is impending doom. But the time frame is drastically different. And I think there's something to be said for like looking at extremes to try to understand things. And so when I think about that, like, yeah, it makes sense to me that there isn't global, like, multilateral consensus about what to do about climate change, and then behavior that is forced upon the public. Just as way behaviors were forced upon the public with COVID, vis-a-vis masks, social distancing. Like, yeah, there are segments of the population that refuse to do that, but the majority of us realize, like, okay, this might actually save somebody's life. So yeah, we'll do this to some extent. The same thing is true with like riding a bus as opposed to like having our own personal vehicle. It's just 10 years out. And yet we make totally different decisions based on it. We don't like think about every time we get in our car, like, shit, this may kill someone. Maybe I shouldn't drive my car because in 10 years, these carbon emissions are like gonna like totally impede upon the ability of a Pacific Islander from living their life as they want to live it today, because the doom is too far away, as Dave was mentioning earlier. So I had a buddy in college who kind of talked me through the same line of logic, and he called himself a nihilist with compassion. And this guy was one of the most like friendly, like warm-hearted individuals who I had encountered in college, and we're still friends to this day. And I said, why do you call yourself a nihilist? That doesn't make any sense. Like, you clearly care about things, lots of things. And he said, you're the astronomer. You know that the Earth is going to be totally erased by the sun in a couple billion years. Life will be over in 1 billion years, and that'll be it for the entire Earth. So nothing that we do here matters in the long scheme of things. It's all going to be gone. And in fact, everything in the solar system is going to be erased after the sun completes its red giant phase and becomes a planetary nebula. For hundreds of light years, it's all going to be gone. And he said, so that's why I'm a nihilist, but today and tomorrow also matter. And that's why I'm a nihilist with compassion. My actions today actually have an effect on people today and tomorrow and the rest of my generation and the next generation. And eventually I'm going to have kids, and he does have kids now. So that's why he called himself a nihilist with compassion. Like, yes, there is impending doom, But our behavior today and tomorrow actually matter for today and tomorrow. So I think that kind of creates an interesting context for thinking about, the existential crises of the destruction of the solar system and of climate change, and of COVID as well. What do you guys think about all that?
I bet this is a potential scenario where the seemingly endless development of artificial intelligence could really have a positive effect on the human race. If we get to a point where artificial intelligence becomes as advanced as we project it to be, we could use that incredible intelligence to help predict more detailed ideas of what these dark looming futures could be like, and we could actually predict a more realistic vision, and we could probably do a lot better at planning ahead. Maybe we don't even have to do the plan. Maybe it can all be kind of developed for us. I don't know. That reminded me of that. What do you guys think? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think there's also a distinction between AI and humans today. Will we be able to develop artificial intelligence with compassion and feelings and emotions and motivation? It's like, does the AI want to have its own life, or is the AI going to work solely to benefit the preservation of the planet?
Right, and that's assuming like it becomes, would it be fully aware, or would it just be a much more advanced version of what we know now?
Yeah, I mean, those are like both the light and the potential dark sides of AI, right? So we're talking about like the glorious future of the Jetsons versus the Matrix.
Yeah. Totally. But I think there's potential there. The way I see it, I think that there definitely could. If we think that artificial intelligence could one day be making more of the complicated political decisions for people, if we start doing that, then of course it can go either way.
There are a couple of scenes in one of the recent Marvel films, Captain Marvel. You guys seen that?
Yeah.
So the planet that Captain Marvel basically got kidnapped to, you find out, spoiler alert, later in the film, is this planet that's run by an AI consciousness. So this AI consciousness has basically taken the place of God. And, it is definitely looked upon as God, and, but a global God, right? The whole planet has decided that it's best if this AI consciousness runs things, makes all the decisions, and basically, you find out, keeps everybody in check. It's more than just the glorious side of AI solving all the problems. It's also the dark side of AI being, the ultimate controlling entity, like it is on the Matrix. But it's way more subtle in the way it's portrayed in the Captain Marvel movie. And so, yeah, I think just as many possibilities as there might be with AI to bring about an incredibly bright future for humanity and the rest of life on Earth, I think there are just as many potentials of it leading to, something more akin to the Matrix or Terminator. And like, how could we possibly even know? which of those possibilities are more likely until we actually have created AI. Assuming that that's even possible, assuming that there's a way to actually code creativity. Sounds like Matt has something to say with that.
I just feel like an old Scrooge because I'm like, not gonna happen.
You don't think that can happen?
No, but even if it did, I view it in the same way as I view like we have all these ideas of grandeur of like what it could be, and then the reality that we can even like think of the bad things. I see it kind of like how we developed nuclear bombs, and then all of a sudden like the people that developed it were like, oh shoot, I should have never, I didn't even think about this, and I shouldn't have even done it. And the reality that we're even able to think about the bad things that could happen to me, it's kind of a big red flag. It's like, if we create it, like it can get abused, and we're acknowledging that that abuse could be like the most, not could be, would be like the most detrimental thing that has ever happened to us. And yet we're like, I want to do it so we can have more fun. It's just like, I don't know, man. It just seems like you're just playing with some bad stuff, playing with fire.
So you think you should be like a full stop?
Well, I mean, honestly, I'm skeptical of us being able to create some consciousness. I think like there's so many things about the way our brains work that we don't really even understand that. So I'm not too afraid, honestly, because it's like, I feel like we would have to really, really understand ourselves better in order to even try to do it in computers. Like we'll get things that are like, I mean, right now, people have been amazed at how close we've gotten, but really we're like nowhere near. But I think we'll continue to get things that people are impressed with, but I don't think that makes it like legit.
Sam.
That concludes. Are we breaking?
Oh no, now I'm back. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
So I was just saying that, yeah, we've created like AI chess champions. Maybe the next development that we'll be really impressed by will be like AI cornhole champions.
Yeah, exactly. Cornhole. I mean, self-driving cars are pretty impressive.
They are.
But pretty much it's just doing like specific actions that's impressing us. It's
Right.
Which I mean, chess is just math, so it's like really not surprising that like they can do math faster and more accurate. Like we've known that.
Right. And driving is just physics, right? If you have enough sensors and quick enough reactions, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, creativity is an interesting thing. And I agree with you, Matt, that we are a long way away from being able to create creativity in a machine, if we ever are.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that you mentioned is a really important part of the search. And I think this actually brings us back to what we were talking about before about why we don't just divert all of our energy towards solving climate change, why we explore it and do all the other types of things. I think one of the things that drives us to do all that is our search to actually understand ourselves. I think through science, even if it isn't, not directly involved with the study of life, I think ultimately it all comes back to figuring out our place on Earth, our place in life, our place in the universe. I think that's one of the motivating factors beyond curiosity that propels us forward in the pursuit of science. And I think that's probably one of the best outcomes, quite frankly. Right? There's a lot of scientific understanding that maybe doesn't have a practical purpose, but I think it does help us understand ourselves. in some ways. So that's my elevator talk for like the grant committee, right?
I like it. I agree.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground again today. Everything from Martian lakes to the matter percentage of the universe and climate change and confronting existential crises in all temporal scales. Just curious if anybody has any concluding thoughts before we adjourn for today.
Is your old roommate, would he still describe himself as a nihilist?
My buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he probably still does. I haven't actually asked him that in a while. I just chatted with him a few weeks ago. And I think probably he still sees things relatively the same. That, what really matters is today and tomorrow, and the long-term existential crises, in terms of like the destruction of the earth, or not much we can do about.
Yeah. I think until that day happens, though, nothing's going to squash our curiosity and desire to push outward, discover things, no matter how long it takes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's, some, I would say, unfortunate data to support that. In terms of like, if you look at like the fall of previous civilizations, they basically like kept going until like the bitter end, until all of their resources were exhausted, as if they didn't even know that was happening, right? They were like just trying to continue curiosity, the human exploration, and then it was over when their resources were completely exhausted right underneath their noses. And I'm referring to Jared Diamond's book Collapse, if you're not familiar with that. And he laid that scenario out pretty clearly, with the warning that we're headed in the same direction. So we shall see.
If we can figure out how to stop killing the earth so much, get a little bit more energy from fusion, somehow get asteroid mining going, I think we can extend that period of time for quite a while. We can continuously drain our resources to the bitter end much longer.
Well, maybe that's better than nothing.
That's all I got.
Ryan, Matt, any final words?
No. I'm good.
All right. Well, we'll see what the great field of astronomy has in store for us next week. Thanks for joining us for Astro-BS, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you.
Thanks, guys.